Hello, this is Donna Zajon, and this is TED for Coaches, Getting Your Stuck Clients Unstuck. And today is May 2nd already. It's our second session of the 6-week class. So welcome those of you who are joining us live, and also those of you that will be listening on your own time. I'm actually sad to say that Barb will not be joining us today. She texted me early this morning that she is in the emergency room and has had some difficulty breathing this morning and some abdominal pain, and definitely wanted to get it checked out. And she was undergoing a number of tests, and I wish I could tell you more. I know that she's in good hands, and she said that she wanted to say hello to everyone, but it just wasn't possible for her to join us today. So send good thoughts to Barb, and I'll keep you up to date. I trust that it's nothing, and that I'm really glad that she's getting some support today. So let's continue by just a couple of announcements. And for those that, again, weren't on the call last week, we really enjoy using the chat room. And down below, you see the chat room where there is a menu that says you can send a note to everyone. And I know, Emma, you're not on the screen today, so can't see this, but everyone else, we encourage you to use the chat room. And you pull the menu down, and you see people's names, and you can click and send a message directly to them, or you can send a message to everyone by just participating in the conversation this way or asking questions. Also, I think everyone now knows how to mute, and we try to do that most of the time. I want to welcome caller 6. Hello, this is Donna. Who is caller 6?
Hi, Donna. Possibly it's me, Susan Good.
Oh, it is. Hi, Susan. Yes, it is you. Okay, so you're calling in, and do you see the screen, Susan?
Not yet.
Okay. Well, we'll trust that you will get there. So welcome. And let me see. D'Alessandro from Italy. Hello, I'm going to mute you, Alessandro.
Hello, how are you?
Hello, Alessandro. Good evening. This is Donna, and welcome.
Yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and mute you.
Thank you.
So that is, to get us started, was the chat room, and I wanted to also have a chance to introduce everyone. And we have 3 people joining us today that were not able to join us last week. So it's Amy, Emma, and Marlene. So let me start with Amy. I'm unmuting you right now. Please share a little bit about yourself, Amy.
Great, thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Very good, thank you. I'm currently living in Ashland, Oregon, which is the southernmost city in Oregon, beautiful area. I'm originally from Los Angeles. Background is broadcast news and news management, and for the last probably 15 years I've been doing strategic visioning with businesses and organizations, coaching as part of that process, and then I graduated from the Hudson Institute a year ago with my coaching certification, and I've been doing leadership and executive coaching, some team coaching and transitions coaching people. And what I hope to get out of this are more tools to help people to move forward in their lives.
Thank you, Amy. Glad you joined us. And so, Emma, I'm unmuting you. Please share a little bit about your background.
I've been coaching about 25 years, kind of one of the older ones. I mainly coach executives professionally and personally. I have a lot of transpersonal psychosynthesis background, and I look forward to learning all these tools. When I'm renewing my credential, and I was just scrolling through, and I saw TED, and I was like, TED, because I've actually worked with a lot of those people setting up TED, and so I thought, so I didn't really know what I was signing up for, and it looks really interesting. I've just downloaded everything, and I will be reading everything, so thank you.
Thank you, Emma. I know oftentimes we get confused with the TED Talks, and we named TED way before we had ever heard of the TED Talks, and of course the empowerment dynamic is totally different than the marvelous TED Talks. But
no, I can, it's great. So
well, with your psychotherapy background, great to have you.
Yes, thank you.
So Marlene, I'm unmuting you. Please tell us about yourself.
Hi, I live in Rice Lake, Wisconsin, and we've had a wonderful day today because we received 15 inches of snow. All of our trees, all of the pines are dancing with snow because they're snow covered. The branches are touching the ground. It is absolutely gorgeous. Now I had to pay a fine today at noon at Rotary because I said it was gorgeous and not a problem. And after listening to last week's recording, I didn't see it as a problem at all. In fact, I still don't. It's wonderful that we are getting that water, but you know, for some people it's not so wonderful. But oh well. As I said, I live in Wisconsin. I was trained with Coaches Training Institute, received my CPPC in 1999, at the same time that my father was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my all kinds of issues went on at that time. But I've been a coach on and off since then. I recently have been working with some friends in the healthcare field, whereby coaching them to help coach patients, coach colleagues with burnout, and we've used a lot of TED. I've purchased about 10 copies of TED. I've given them all away, and I have a copy on my my Nook. So it's an amazing concept, and I can't wait to learn more about how to use it. And yeah, that's me.
Okay, thank you, Marlene. I love the shift in perspective around the snow. And since it's May 2nd, I'm not sure I would have that shift in perspective. But well, thank you all, and let's begin with the homework as we do at the top of the call each time. I want to hear from several of you about the reactive triggers exercise, and whatever comes up for you. What did you notice about what kinds of contexts and situations that triggered you, and then what did you notice about the way you manage those triggers, the kinds of strategies you came up with? So anyone, unmute yourself and jump in with a comment and a learning about the homework. Who wants to start?
This is Russ.
Yes, Russ. Thank you for going first. What did you learn?
Well, one of the things that is a reactive trigger for me is interfacing or coming up against what I call religious zealots. Those people who want to make sure their dogma is clear to everybody, and I get defensive. My strategy is I kind of get defensive, at least internally, and sometimes I'll say something, but at least internally, it just comes across to me as arrogant, because it comes down to you know, my way is really the only way.
So you've noticed that trigger, and what I heard you say is that you manage it sometimes by saying something. What else did you learn about how you manage that reactivity?
Well, in all honesty, I have not managed it in a constructive way to date. Even though I may not say anything out loud, inside, I'm really judging, and I realize that probably isn't constructive for anyone, including myself.
Well, thank you for starting off, Russ. This exercise is about heightening our awareness to allow us to be present to how we want to choose to be in the moment. We can't be at full choice unless we're aware of that reactivity and that strategy. So thanks for beginning. Appreciate your vulnerability. Who else would like to share what they learned from the homework exercise?
This is Marlene, and I would like to share something that happened to me. I was riding in the car with my husband, and he made some comment about one of the tenants in one of our rental properties, and my immediate reaction was I started to sweat and think, well, that's my responsibility, and I need to get on the phone, and I need to call, and I need to do something about this problem because the police had been to the home, and there are all these issues going on. And as I drove up towards the house, I said to myself, why am I getting involved in this drama? What? Get over it. And I drove right on by, and I let it go. I just let go. Whatever happened, whatever it was, I sent a text message to the tenant and asked if I could meet her at 3 o'clock on Monday. I met her at 3 o'clock on Monday, and I said, what do you want? And she's like, well, I'm homeless. I don't have a place to go. And I said, well, so what's the solution? And it was so beautiful. I felt so calm. It was so amazing. Not to just jump right in there and say, you can't do this, you can't do that, you get out of here, whatever. It was amazing.
Marlene, thank you. And again, what a beautiful story about awareness, and that this being present to what triggers you and your strategy and observing that then allowed you to have that powerful choice. Thank you, Marlene.
It was truly amazing. So that's all.
Well, that's what awareness and choice, it really brings that freedom to us. So I want to take just a moment more, Marlene. I know we haven't gotten into the roles yet. It's a big part of our conversation here today. But what role would you say you naturally went to when your husband made that comment and you started strategizing? What role in the drama triangle is that?
Well, at first I went to victim because I do that often with my husband. I will go to a victim relationship with him. That it's the poor me attitude. I think that's victim. But I really, that was my initial one, and that's when I became so anxious and upset and sweaty and wanting to do something right away. Yeah. Which can become then the rescuing role. You might enter the triangle through the victim, but quickly go to the rescuing role. So, absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you for
behavior. Yeah.
Thank you, Marlene. So let's take one more. Who would like to share about what they learned from the homework? Anyone? Just unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Ron.
Yes, Ron.
And, I'd like just to share an experience I had this last weekend. You know, early in my career, I was a collegiate coach, and typically I pride myself on being a good fan. And I was at my son's soccer game this last weekend, and they were playing their arch rivals, and they hadn't beat them the last 3 years. And so the boys were really excited about potentially beating their arch rivals. They've gotten to the point where they can compete, and we ended up drawing an official. And you probably can see where this one's going a little bit. An official who doesn't care much for our coach, and at least that's the belief of the team parents. Anyway, by the time he called the third penalty kick, and they had scored their third point, they beat us 3-2, I found myself moving from victim to predator and simply saying out loud when we would score our points, at least we earn ours. And so I went from victim to predator, And it was interesting because my message, right, I wanted to, it's not constructive in any shape or form, but I was looking for some sort of justice. And, you know, I typically coach people how to behave effectively in those kinds of environments. And yet here I am, overly enrolled in my son's desire to finally beat their arch rivals. And then they were some pretty poor calls. Now, the third penalty kick happened to be called against my son. And it was the worst of the 3 calls. And so anyway, so I'm out there, and then I see the parents from the other team turn and look at me, right? And I went, oh, I've become that guy, you know. And that's not typically me in that environment, but I realized that by, you know, being over-enrolled and being too vested in an expected outcome, that things that were outside of my control, I was triggering on to the point where I was voicing it, and it impacted to a degree all the players and probably all the parents. So the good news moving forward is we get an opportunity in 2 weeks to play them again, and so I get an opportunity to take a more effective strategy with me.
Ron, it was so powerful, I'm not sure where to start. First, I'll say a personal identification. My oldest daughter played D1 soccer at Santa Clara, and for 10 years I was overly enrolled in soccer, and understand fully when there are certain characteristics of the environment, and for me, competitive sports with my kids is one of them. I must now be on guard for being triggered into reactivity. I can be very mild and calm, just as you said, in so many situations. But what a beautiful story, Ron, that there are some situations where the stakes are high, depending on how we've interpreted those stakes. Those stakes are high, and we become different people. And learning to observe ourselves and not beat ourselves up like I'm hearing. I bet you did some this week, but I'm also hearing you've really made a choice about how you want to be different. So thank you for that powerful story of observing yourself and the commitment to be different next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Okay, well, let's continue on, and thank you. This is a really wonderful example of how we like to do the check-in at the top of the call around homework. And again, we ask the homework to be about you so that you get these exercises and this work in your body somatically. You fully get it in your body, because what we've learned about presenting and working with the TED work is that if you get it, it becomes quite easy for you to present it to other people, either in a full half-day retreat with a team or with one-on-one with your clients. It just becomes something natural that you're able to talk about and listen and help others make sense of the work. So thank you for taking on the homework. What I'd like to do now is summarize the last session briefly and build the foundation of our TED house here so that each week links nicely with the link before, the week before, so that you can see and feel and sense how all these TED frameworks work together. And we said the first one about thinking about the way we think is based upon the 2 mindsets, or the 2 orientations that are based upon the FISB. The FISB being, what do we focus on, what's our inner state, and what behavior do we take. So several great examples already this morning of what we focus on depends upon how we interpret that focus. And what I mean by that is, for example, I love growing lilies, stargazer lilies. So I can look at a lily and focus on that lily, and it immediately reminds me of the day my 19-year-old son was born, and I got a bouquet of lilies, and that night, the first night in the hospital with him, fragrance of those lilies, and lilies just remind me of birth and love. Someone else could look at a lily and have had a challenging experience with their father, who was that was his favorite flower, and that person, the lily may remind them of their father and maybe something that was not in a powerful relationship with our Father, and in fact that lily then evokes an emotional state completely different from my emotional state, but the two of us are still looking at a lily. And then our behavior becomes totally different depending on the reaction we take based upon our emotional state. This is a core concept of human behavior. And, you know, really it's fairly new. Emotional intelligence, the book first came out in 1995. It's really only not even 20 years old, this concept of really grokking how deep our emotional reaction drives us. So by understanding these triggers and the emotions and the behavior that we react to, we're able to get a first deep sense of awareness, of personal awareness of who we are being as a human being evolves. So we went through the FISB then between the two orientations, the problem orientation. The problem creates anxiety, reactivity. Things that we don't want, don't like is what we focus on. The outcome orientation, entirely different. What we care about creates an entirely different emotional state. We generally call that sense of passion. And then that gives us fuel for action. And entirely two different types of actions occur. Over time, the problem creates anxiety, which then we respond to that anxiety and we react. And over time, all we're doing is we're on a roller coaster where we go in an oscillating relationship with focusing on what we don't want and don't like. So many teams, so many individuals, when they're in the problem orientation, this is the source of their stuckness, because all they're doing in their own brain is constantly focusing on, like a recorder, of what they don't want. And our stuck clients, you know, get stuck for many, many reasons, but one of the clear reasons is that they lose any kind of perspective that anything is possible, or that they have, even if they thought something was possible, they don't believe in their capacity any longer to get it. And that's who we are as coaches, to help birth that renewal in them. The type of results we said is entirely different with the outcome orientation. We'll say a lot more about this in our 5th and 6th session of how we take action. But in the outcome orientation, it's continuous learning, taking one step, adjusting, creating another step, adjusting and creating, and over time we create continuous improvement. So I want to share a personal story about how this worked for me. About 2.5 years ago, I was on just a walk here in the neighborhood, and I was again in a reoccurring conversation with myself. Well, it's time, Donna, to lose those 20 pounds again. And I observed my thinking about that, and I suddenly stopped and realized that I was focusing on my body and losing 20 pounds as though I'm a problem. And I was shocked because I teach this work, and it was the first time that I had become aware that I was seeing my weight as a problem, and that my relationship with that weight was in a reoccurring, oscillating reactive state. And what I mean by that is, when I listened to my inner talk, I said to myself, well, okay, here it goes again. You'll lose those 20 pounds, but you know, you can do that, but you know you're going to put it back on again. So you might as well get started. But this cycle internally of anxiety about doing that, I was shocked by how it had taken me over in such an unconscious state. And so the question we ask ourselves when we want something different, we move from victim to creator, we say to ourselves, what do we really want? And in that moment, I was able to immediately say to myself, I was actually surprised how fast I said, what I really want is optimum health as I age. So with that as my new outcome statement, I was able to say, okay, well, what's the truth of the matter of my current state, and what step can I take? And that step I said I wanted to take is I want to be in a healthier relationship with the way I eat. And as I won't go completely into the story, but within a month, I was in a completely different eating pattern, exercise pattern, because I chose to really have a healthier, optimum health as I age. It was a completely different statement and focus than I got to lose 20 pounds. See, some people would say losing 20 pounds is a goal and a great goal. In the TED work, that type of goal statement creates anxiety and actually works against us eventually. And I know a lot of us like to be goal-oriented, and again, we're going to say more about this when we learn to take action in session 5 and 6. But the change to really focus on what you want and get clear about that got me unstuck. I'm pleased to say, for the most part, those 20 pounds have stayed off. I feel so much better about myself and in my relationship to my health. Now it's no longer about losing weight. Now everything I talk about is my health and being in a sense of well-being. So I wanted to share that story about the difference of how these two orientations work. And because I still needed to solve some problems, so to speak, in order to manifest my health and wellness. It's not like we don't address issues. We do constantly, but now in service to the clear outcome that we want. So with that as a foundational summary of where we were last time, now what begins to occur is relationships. And we say in the second part of the TED work is now we begin to think about how do we relate. How do we enter into relationships with ourselves and with others once we get really clear about the way we think? And that's the source of where we're going in this second class. So for those of you, again, who may have come on just a little late, I wanted to say that Barb is not with us today, so I'm going to continue to facilitate both the presentation as well as our coaching learning points. I'm going to stop at various different points and ask you all to engage and to be into some questions. Let me continue now in beginning the relationship dynamics. And the first one being what we call in TED work the dreaded drama triangle. It's based upon Dr. Cartman's drama triangle. 40 years ago, Dr. Stephen Cartman, very involved in the transactional analysis movement. Many of, in the Bay Area there where Emma is, there was quite a movement around, first book was I'm Okay, You're Okay, that really started a lot of the mainstream conversation. And David and I had a chance to fly down and visit with Dr. Cartman, who was in his early 80s, still living in the Bay Area, about 3 years ago. And we learned more about how he developed this triangle that so names very basic archetypal roles when we're in a reactive state. And he said he first observed it because he loved to be a actor. He was just an amateur actor. And as he started getting involved in acting, he realized in almost every play and every movie, there was a villain, there was a victim, and there was someone that came in to save the day, that this was based upon fairy tales and just the essence of how we tell our stories for millennium. And as he studied that more as a psychologist, he was able to name these three roles. So the first role, of course, is that of victim. The person that sees and feels that they're powerless in the face of the life that they're living. And the box that just came on the screen and the distinction between victimization and victimhood is very important. And I always say this when I'm working with individuals or teams, is that what we're talking about in the TED work is about an identity as a victim. And we call that victimhood. We are not talking about situations where people absolutely are victimized or victimization. Maybe a random crime, maybe a car accident, maybe their house burns down or a disease process. This is victimization, but how we respond to life's challenges is considered victimhood. And in all the TED work, that's what we're talking about. So the victim is powerless by the way they consider their relationship to the world. They have such a, they've surrendered to believing that things are possible, that their dreams will be thwarted in some way, and they say to themselves, poor me, why me? So what is important to know here as begin is, do you notice how the top or the bottom of the triangle points downward? Because that is the downward energy of the victim. And the victim both has an inner triangle going on with saying that I am not worthy, I won't get what I want in life. And this also then is how we engage with others. So there's that external triangle going on with the other. And when that occurs, we almost always have the persecutor showing up. And the persecutor now is the one that says, that in the triangle is described as the problem. It could be a circumstance like a disease. For the TED work, we tend to speak more about relationships with other people. So it's the person that is the problem for the victim. And that person dominates, blames, tears down, fears their own victimhood, and by fearing their own victimhood, make sure that they do what they need to do to control and dominate and blame to keep that victim one down. Now, once that dynamic is set up and the tension between the victim and persecutor is set up, always a rescuer comes into play. And the rescuer is the one who is considered the pain reliever. But the rescuer is the helper, the caretaker, and the person who is doing what they can to help, but it's difficult to see themselves as a victim or taking part in this victim triangle because they're the ones with the answers. But this is what's essential for us to understand, is at the heart of all these roles is fear as an emotion and the many emotions that are birthed out of fear. And the role that is at play for all of these is a victim role. So even though the persecutor and rescuer strategies may come into play here of how they're going to manage their fear, at the heart of all of these is fear and victimhood. But just how we play the roles switch very often. It's like musical chairs. We talk about in the TED work, there's a way to enter into the triangle. So for me, I enter the triangle through the rescuer role. I jump in and want to help and caretake. If the other person that I'm trying to take care of doesn't appreciate me, then I can turn on them very fast. And, you know, usually with a little bit of panache. I don't turn in too strong of a ways, but I can internally then feel rejected and turn on them. Then they become the victim, and they feel persecuted. And that circling motion occurs so fast. That's why we must become aware of our triggers, must become aware of our management strategies so we can see these roles. Let me say just a little bit more about the type of what we call the faces of each one of these roles. The persecutor is really an interesting one because the persecutor doesn't necessarily just come across as a jerk or aloof. They may come across what I call very sappy sweet. And I was recently in the South and in Florida, and someone said, "Oh yes, we have a tone here where someone might say, 'Now, honey, that's just not the way we do it here.'" That's not a very good Southern accent. But the point is that there can be a sappy, sweet, condescending tone, and that is very much the persecuting role. Even though they're coming across with that so-called sweetness, what they're doing is manipulating and controlling. There can also be a persecutor with a very caustic sense of humor. I remember a coach telling me that she was working with someone in a couples coaching, and the husband would not engage in the conversation in an authentic way, but he certainly would throw in jokes to keep everybody laughing and at a distance. And in that sense, he actually became a persecutor because he was controlling the situation. There's also the cynic, who has never seen a positive bone in their body. They're about criticizing and being cynical. So as you get to know the persecuting role, know that there's many different ways of how one can control and blame and tear down. But at the heart of what they're fearing is their own powerlessness. And as you as a coach get in touch with that, you can help them see and become aware of that. And let me take just another moment here before I turn it over for questions and clarifications, that there's several different faces of the rescuer also. I mean, at the heart of the rescuer is the need to fix the world. And there's a real sense of urgency to jump in and fix, even when it's not their role to do that. It may have a short-term sense of boosting our self-worth and our ego, because we're waiting for a compliment to say what a great job we did when we jumped in and helped. But at the source of all this, again, it is our fear of not being needed that is occurring for the rescuer. So this can take many different faces. So one of them is the pleaser. And the pleaser is so fast to make everything positive and good. The idea that they could even say the word no is very painful for the pleaser. They're very invested in relationships, or very enmeshed. And they oftentimes wonder why they don't get their needs met because they're giving so much. The rescuer may also take on a face of being a protector. They desire to protect those that they love so much that they can actually overstep their bounds and be very protective. I've done this with David because he's got a lot going on, and as an author and speaker, his schedule's very packed at times. And one day he came home from several days, and I didn't give him all of his mail because I wanted to protect him from all these things he had to do to get caught up. And it was only later that he discovered that I hadn't given him some mail. And oh my gosh, the way he clearly challenged me, that was eroding trust in me. And he became suspicious of maybe what else was I withholding. And then I became feeling victimized that, well, I'm just trying to help you, honey, because I'm protecting you. Oh, when I said that word, that was a powerful conversation for us to apply our own work. I had no idea how much my protecting role had emerged from that rescuing that I naturally am. There's another face that I distinguish often called the counselor. And the counselor is just this great listener, but they're actually even prying. And they're the ones that's got to find the gossip of what's going on in the office, what's going on in the whole family. The counselor has always got that best book to read or to have some advice. They love people coming to them for advice, and may be actually very good at it. But that counselor, if it gets too far down the road, can become very caustic in that savior rescuing role that others, might on the surface beginning to like that appreciation of that much attention, but it can also become very toxic. So I'm sure there's others too. I wanted to share those additional nuances of what we've learned about the way these three roles manifest themselves. So I've said a lot. I want to stop now and check in with you all to see if there's any questions or comments that you have or any clarification for explaining these three very familiar roles. We all have these energies at times, and we become familiar with them. So please unmute yourself and let me respond to a question or comment. Anyone? Okay, well, I'm going to go on then, and we're going to look at then what's the implications here for our coach learning points. And for the coach, for who you're being, you must be aware of your own DDT tendencies. And as the three of you that checked in today, you really shared being aware and being on guard of which DDT tendencies you have and in what circumstances. This is essential for the coach. And to know your default role and to be on lookout for it. So in just a moment after we finish these coach learning points, I do want to check in with each of you and ask, what is your default role? You know, clearly my default role is being a rescuer, and if Barb was here today, she would say her default role is being a persecutor. And that's why we have a great time together, because we're really aware of the tension between those default roles. So I want to turn it back to you in just a moment and ask for each of you, or many of you, to share, what is your default role? Susan just said she wasn't sure how to unmute herself, and so Susan, I believe I have unmuted you, so please, yes, go ahead.
You can hear me.
I can.
Oh, okay, so my trigger homework puts me right on this map quite solidly. So I was wondering, I'm not sure I'm moved on to the next learning point here, but I think it will segue a little bit. What I'm struggling with is seeing myself in the triangle as I flip around the parts. So my trigger specifically is team members who go into what I have thought of as a victim mentality. I'm not quite sure that's the right language now in this model, and how it shows up is either language or nonverbal trigger for me. That's blaming others for their condition. Or rolling eyes. Can you flip back to the actual triangle? Or hang on, I can maybe go.
Yes, here I've got it back now.
I got it.
Oh, okay, so and Emma, who doesn't have it live, we're going back to look at the triangle again. So Susan, if I understand it, what you're asking is that you have some direct reports that come across with a victim mentality, or they yes, that's what you think it is, and you find yourself, what strategy do you use, Susan?
Well, on a bad day, I think I'm a persecutor. That's what I was just trying to figure out. On a bad day, you know, if they're talking about what someone else should do, or, you know, they should really handle this differently, you know, I will be pretty, like, well, so who is they, and how is that mindset working for you, and not very compassionate. On a good day, a strategy for me is to try to bring that sort of compassion, and usually it deepens understanding, because I'll start with a question and then see if we can reframe it. But what I was trying to get right now for my learning point is it's almost like I'm experience myself as a persecutor, trying to make sense out of it in this model. Persecutor towards their poor me.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot's going on. It could be, and that's how it gets very enmeshed, because we have our internal triangle going on of how we can comment about how well we're doing in the moment with others, as well as then the responding to the other in an external triangle with them. So that goes a little deeper in explaining why it can be a challenge at first, of diagnosing, if you will, of what's occurring. What I heard is that when others start complaining and blaming others, on a bad day you can jump in and problem solve with them, trying to figure out what they're complaining about. Is that correct?
Oh, I think that's generous. No, it's more like I'm fighting the urge to just go say, what the are you up to, and stop this, and that's not our work, right? So I'm actually not managing the trigger very well. Not that I do a lot externally with it, but people always know what your being is and my being's not so great. I'm really hooked by that.
Yes, I hear that. And in our next session, we're going to really get behind some of these roles and look at what's our intention and how do we sustain the shift over into the more empowering TED roles. But it does clearly sound like there's some persecuting going on. You're just wanting to get on with it, and the intent is just to stop it and control it. And that's usually what I find is the persecuting red flag, is trying to control and dominate and move on. Yeah, is that helpful?
It will be. It's good.
Yeah, we can continue to be in dialogue about this, Susan, and on how this manifests. But more importantly, how do we shift out of it? Thank you, Susan. So let me go on to the coach learning points that you have in front of you. The knowing your default role and notice whom you are being as coaching is essential. And that is challenging for us, and it requires that we really become self-aware, which is exactly what we're asking you to do in this webinar. Become deeply self-aware of your beingness as you show up for your calls with your clients and your conversations. And then notice most which DDT role is difficult for you to be with. This is really was new to me when I first started this work, and it was great insight for me to become aware of that the persecutor was the most difficult role for me to be with. And as I identified that, I was able to unpack it and take a look at what that was about for me. Simply put, it was my need for independence, and as a persecutor tries to control me, I get really hooked by that. For Barb, as a default role of persecutor, and becoming very aware of how she hated the notion of being a victim, she got most uncomfortable when people had the victim complaining game, where I tended to be a little more compassionate with a person who sees themselves as a victim, because I want to rush in and help. So this idea, and I want to challenge you to really become familiar with what DDT role is difficult for you to be with as a coach. You'll notice that through your inner state, your tightening up, your language. Maybe, Susan, that's partly what's going on with you when you hear certain people on your team playing a certain role. It's the most difficult one for some unconscious driver that's pulling you into the drama with them.
Yeah.
So as we continue the coaching relationship with the client, what we mean by stay off the court is stay out of that problem solving with them. That's going to only pull you more into the reactive problem orientation conversation with them. As you notice who you're being and being aware of the kinds of questions and inquiries that can keep you from pulling into it. Really notice when you get hooked. And as you notice that, take the breath, take the time for you to pull yourself back and being present. And getting yourself unstuck, whether that's asking for help, that's asking for you, hopefully each of you have a coach, for knowing what your support system is. And for me as a rescuer, one of the most difficult things is to ask for support. Because again, I'm a caretaker as a rescuer, so I don't see myself as needing help. It's everybody else that needs the help is my orientation to the world. So especially for rescuers, you've got to learn to create that self-care. And support the client to see themselves in the DDT roles and what triggers them. And as you are able to tell your stories, you know, some of the stories that we heard today, that creates an openness so they can share their vulnerabilities. That's very helpful as a coach, especially in an early relationship building with people as they learn these roles. They'll understand more about how they can be in relationship with the TED work. Because what we're trying to do is create an aha moment. And sometimes we don't need to say much at all, that just the two triangles alone creates these huge ahas. And I've got a number of coach friends that said that they've learned just to shut up. They don't even need to explain it very much because these roles and energies are so familiar. They're archetypal for human beings. We also recommend that you hold the space for the client's discomfort. The more they're able to stay in that discomfort, they're able to see what it feels like and recognize it. So if we go too fast and want to step over it and fix it, we're actually doing a disservice, is what we have found in the TED work. And this is where the artistry of coaching comes in, because knowing when to hold it and when to say, okay, what's next, what do you really want, is the artistry of coaching. And not to avoid rushing the process, trying to make the client feel better. And coaches as rescuers, this is really a cardinal sign of what can start happening, because we start over-coaching, and we can try so hard to make, if the client feels better, then we're going to feel better. And this is actually disempowering to the client for them to learn when is it that they're in the drama triangle, and what does that feel like, and how to recognize it early on. So let me stop there, and I do want to open it now, and let's hear from 3 or 4 of you. Unmute and jump in and share with all of us, what is your default role? Anyone?
This is Maria here.
Hi.
My default role is, well, persecutor, but also the victim itself. I'm very good at complaining. I love that. And first, let me give you an example. For example, I'm at the airport and my flight is delayed. Well, first I start complaining, and then I will, get mad or cynical, and I would stay there. For example, I would from home front, and I would, the call would go like, yeah, well, of course, it happens to me again. Flight's delayed, couple of hours, blah, blah, blah. I would stay there. And yeah, I learned to accept more, and, but still this is, the persecutor is in me. And the complainer. I love to complain.
Well, Marja, thank you for sharing that. It very well could be an empowering first step for you to make a choice and choose to be different.
Yeah, I always did that. I'm talking about where I used to be.
Ah, I got it.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marja. Who else would like to? Who else would like to share?
This is Emma. I don't know if you can hear me.
Hi.
Yeah. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, good. I'm definitely tend to be the rescuer and helper, and I think for me is I almost feel like I jump out of my body. That's kind of the way I'm paying attention to it. And so I just try to take a breath and stay centered. I don't always do it, but that's my goal. And I think personally and professionally, with what I've been doing lately, when I'm not even able to get centered, something that I've gotten in touch with lately is tuning into tenderness. Really is a key for me. It kind of shifts it. And my own tenderness, and then tenderness if I'm working with a client. And it's kind of been transformational for me, just maybe within the last 6 months.
Emma, that's very sweet. It's very tender. And I got the authenticity of that emotional shift from moving from fixing someone to really being in a tender, compassionate relationship with yourself. And I would say that's the self-care that I'm hearing you really nurture, and which allows you then to be in a very deep emotional connection with the other. Yeah. Thanks, Emma. Yeah, who else would share about your default role?
Hi, Donna. This is Amy. Can you hear me?
I can, Amy. Thank you.
Okay. I've had a couple of problems with unmuting during a couple of these. So, okay. So my situation is I'm definitely a rescuer and a fixer because I don't like the discomfort of friction. And part of what actually sent me deeper into this, I realized recently, was that my brother has had problems with addiction throughout his childhood, so he's a real manipulator. And so any direction that I would try to work the situation would come back to to bite me sooner or later, and usually sooner, and realizing that I actually couldn't fix it for him, and that I had to actually take it, I had to stand in balance in a center in a very different way, really shifted my world and my understanding of how some of this works. And so.
Yeah, that's powerful, Amy, and those are very big issues, and I'm hearing you're making lots of good steps towards really stepping into your empowerment of what do you want for you.
Yes. It's been an amazing shift that's taken a long time, and this is going to help me, further clinch this. Very grateful for this work.
Thank you, Amy. We have time for one more sharing of a default role.
Hi. Hi, it's Alessandro.
Yes,
I used to be. Hi. My default role was usually to be a prosecutor. I had my own company, so I realized that I was using some manners which were in a way too direct. So at a certain point, I changed my job, and actually I closed the business. I started something else. I started to learn to be a coach. I started to be trained as a coach because I thought that I could open up new possibilities through a different behavior. And so from sometimes I find myself to be a prosecutor right away, but then I have a second thought, and I really try to look for different options. So I also try to care more. So I would tend to be a rescuer sometimes. So I actually change it into rescuer. And in some cases, of course, I am a victim, but that depends on the history, on the background, maybe with a person. With some people, I would tend to be a victim just because of past history. But basically, I think I can go into these three places.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for sharing all that. It sounds like you also are going through some very big learning.
Yeah.
Well, let me wrap up this part about sharing the DDTs, and certainly as we build the next several weeks, we're going to continue to come back to these all-important roles as we understand them. This is what we meant by these are our default roles. When I first introduced the key concepts to all this work, is that the drama triangle roles tend to be our default roles in life because our neurology wires us this way to look for threats, to scan the horizon and look for threats. And then we must make sense of it, whether it's on a soccer field. When we see that referee, we immediately make sense of this is a threat, and we get keyed up and we respond appropriately to defend ourselves. The way to the path out of this is self-awareness. We must become aware of when we get triggered into these roles and have the courage to sustain the shift. It doesn't happen overnight at all, but what I'm so proud to be part of David's work is that he continued to ask as a coach, what's the alternative? I know these three roles exist, but as a coach, we must have a place to go with ourselves and with our clients that are more resourceful, more empowering. And it was through asking that question for many years that he finally got the epiphany around there is a more resourceful alternative triangle. And as we worked with it, we purposely drew the triangle to go upward so that the center role, the antidote to the victim, is creator. And the creator says, what do I want in my life? And takes responsibility. See, the victim believes that they're disempowered, won't get what they want, don't know what they want. Even if they knew what they wanted, they won't get it. And so that downward energy is the opposite here with our TED triangle, and the creator energy is uplifting because the creator continues to ask, what do I want in my life, and how do I take responsibility? And in taking responsibility, continues to ask with compelling vision of what do I care about? What are my values? And whatever comes my way, I own my ability to choose. I can do it is the theme of the creator. And we focuses on outcomes. So the way a creator thinks, the FISB, is what do I want? What do I care about? And the creator in those situations feels that inner state. So our stuck clients don't know what they want. And the issues that arise and the problems that come up is what dominates their thinking. So one of the other things I want to mention about the DDT is all three of the roles are pitted against each other. The victim fights with the persecutor, and the persecutor fights with the victim, and the rescuer fights. They're all at odds. There's a reactive energy at play. In the TED triangle, with all three of these roles, there is a collaboration, a co-creatorship that is occurring. And that is why, again, the triangle has these two strong roles as a pyramid anchoring the entire empowerment dynamic. So the challenger and the coach are oftentimes seen. I get this question a lot. What's the difference between a challenger and a coach? Are they really the same thing? And I'd say in many ways, all three of these roles are an integrated, empowering relationship of a centering. Because the creator says, here's what I want. Here's what I care about. The challenger says, okay, so let's grow and let's learn and then develop. Whatever shows up, we can see it as a learning opportunity. So the challenger is really courageous and says, in spite of what shows up every day, I can continue to live my values. I can be a truth teller. So the challenger kind of says to the creator, I got your back. I have the strength to be able to stand firm. I often call it a masculine type energy. The coach says, how are we going to do this? And that's where the art of inquiry and asking great questions is the third role in this empowerment dynamic. And the coach says, I'm not exactly sure how we're going to get there, but let's clarify more. Are we all on the same page? Supports and assists. So just a quick story. A couple of years ago, my 19-year-old son, the Lily son, got a drunk driving ticket. Actually happened to be the evening of my birthday. So as you can imagine, there was some family drama around that. And I remember a few days later just I knew we were going to have a powerful family conversation about this. And I got very clear about my intention of how I wanted to be in relationship with him during this conversation. And I remember standing up and looking up to him. He was 6'3". And I remember putting my finger in his chest. And I very clearly my intention was to be a challenger to him. And I put my finger on his chest and I said, son, you are better than this. You are better than this. I clearly wanted to be a challenger to him. And then I immediately said, what's your next step? How are you going to deal with this? My old self would rescue and say, okay, let's sit down here. How are we going to, I would do this. I'll do this for you and I'll do that. And the empowerment dynamic in this example of the family drama around my son's drunk driving, it was a huge signpost and map for me of how to work through this process. So these three roles are integral into who we are as leaders, who we are with our clients, and I had one CEO tell me he needs to learn no other three roles than to learn to be the co-creator of his own life, challenge members of his team to be creators, learn how to challenge them, and how to coach and develop them. So let me continue on with our coaching learning points, and then I'm going to open it up to you of which one of these roles do you most resist stepping into? Which one of these roles do you most resist? So for the coach, you must ask yourself, as I just said, which one do you most resist? And I'm going to ask you that in just a moment. I want to hear from each of you. The other is, what do you most prefer? Because there are one of those three roles, my hunch is that each of you find a little easier to step into. And those may be the roles you tend to go to more often, and then when you resist, you stay away from building that muscle. And what we really need to learn to align ourselves is, how do we work with all three of those roles? How do we have an equal TED muscle, so to speak? The other thing I want to mention here about the coach learning points of who we are is that note oftentimes when you get excited about a new tool, such as the TED coaching tool, we may want to use this tool to rescue other people. We say everybody should read the TED book, or this new way of thinking is going to be the next sliced bread. And be cautious about that. I encourage you to use the TED work as a way that works for you, and know that if you have a rescuing tendency, you can use TED to try to rescue others. So let me stop there, and I'd like to open it up to maybe 3 or 4 of you. Which role in the TED work do you most resist stepping into? Just unmute yourself and come forward.
Hi, it's Susan.
Hi, Susan.
I can't, it's a bit tricky for me not being a coach, although I am in other coach training. I have a preference for creator challenger, flip back and forth, and I avoid coach. Bit of a problem, you could see.
Is this a new awareness, Susan?
Not new.
Mm-hmm.
Relatively new.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And anyone else, what role do you find you're resisting? Ron.
Hi, this is Ron.
Yes, Ron. What do you resist?
It's interesting because as that question comes to me, I don't even want to answer it. Meaning, what I want to talk about is, I love to be in the coach space, and I spend more time there than I ought, and I need to spend more time in the challenge or possibly creator. So I default, if you will, into the coach, and don't spend as much time as I need to in the others.
Thanks, Ron. That's funny. Just before you said that, I almost added to everyone says, okay, now just notice if you're tightening up anywhere in your gut or in your body. Because you might be noticing that you don't want to tell the truth about there's a role that you're avoiding, and then you come on and say that. Yeah, so thanks again for the courage and the vulnerability there of admitting.
Yes.
Yeah, thanks. One more. Maybe someone we haven't heard from. Go ahead. Was that Amy?
Yeah, hi Donna, this is Amy.
Yes.
Yeah, challenger would be the one that I've had, that I'm continue to really work on because of the resistance and because of, going up against somebody and really challenging them or challenging myself. So that's the muscle I'm really working on.
Yeah, and so especially for anyone that's conflict adverse, which I grew up in a very sweet, nice family. No one raised their voice, so conflict was always been a bit of a challenge for me. I'll just say, Amy, one of the things I've learned is to reframe what does a challenger mean. A challenger does not have to be someone that's overly assertive, even though the finger in the chest was for me. It can be someone who really just is clear about your values and state it and let it go, and that's it. And so just offer that as, go ahead.
It just feels much better the more I do that, and it's really, you know, it's really a learning edge for me.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, all of you. I want to continue on going on then for the, as we begin to start wrap up here and get to our homework for the next week. What are the coach and relationship with client? What do we need to pay attention to? And this question of what role does my client need me to be in at this moment? This now puts us firmly into walking with our client and understanding what they need at the time and letting go of our needs such that we can find the courage to muster that role, even in spite of it not being as familiar or not being that comfortable for us. And this is where we sometimes may ask for help. David so helped me and coached me before I went into that family session with my son, and it allowed me to have that courage. And once we get that courage and we work that muscle, it becomes more familiar to us. Present the TED roles as a new possibility. This so fits who we are as coaches. We always look at possibility. If we don't have someplace for our clients to go, we're continuing to be in that problem-solving, drama-filled conversation with them. And as we build next week into how do we make the shift, what questions do we ask, what kind of reflections do we suggest, these TED roles really do give a new possibility. And know that we can create a choice by just simply inviting them. As we explain the roles, we can do it with the 2 triangles. I've heard from coach after coach who just, even on a napkin, just takes a moment to share the 2 triangles. And because this is so familiar, we don't have to over-explain it. And because you're getting it, you're experiencing it through this webinar and doing the homework, you know what it feels like. And if we just simply share it, we can say, victim creator, which do you choose? Do you want to rescue or coach? Which do you choose? Now early on, these roles of creator, challenger, coach are not as familiar. They're just not as familiar as victim, rescuer, persecutor is. So we do need to focus on how to shore up these roles. This is what leadership development, this is what coaching is about. And depending on the stage of change, of how ready someone is to shift, just giving them that choice may not always, they may not be ready to make that shift. We'll say more about that as we go on through the webinar. But giving them at least the idea that there's another way of living is, we feel, Barb and I feel, is very much our role as a coach. Supporting the client and seeing and believing in that new future is who we are as coaches. So when we can see it and feel it on ourselves, we can be that inspiring place for others. And we can give them suggestions about the ways they can see this in a new way. When they're in the problem orientation, they constantly go around and round in their own head. And as we can help share this new perspective, it's going to give them a new future. So continuing to be aware that some clients, the TED perspective may initially be energizing and hopeful, and later they can feel discouraged because this is not just something we snap our fingers and go from one or the other. We've already heard from several of you today that we're working on this. I'm getting better at it. Well, this is a change process and a continuum. So yes, there can be really initial enthusiasm, and then later some discouragement, and that's where the art of coaching is important, because that's how we support them and sustain them. I'll also say for some the TED perspective can also initially be traumatizing, or even they can even feel like more than a victim because they want to know, oh, why can't I do that? And can immediately turn on themselves. So it's a little bit unpredictable how someone responds to the idea of the two triangles and the two roles. And be with that. Notice your ability to be with all of that. And finally, be with your emotions. Trust the process that this new awareness is offering to them and is offering to yourself. So we have about 2 or 3 more minutes here before I get into the homework. I'd like to open it up and continue to ask for questions, comments, clarifications. Just remember to unmute yourself. Well, as a way of wrap-up, what most is landing for you so far? What most is landing for you so far? I'd like to hear from 2 or 3 of you.
Well, what's interesting to me is both of the triangles, because I was more used to thinking of like a victim is a victim and a coach is a coach, and here you see that there are different approaches and that victims come in different disguises. And that was yeah, a good learning point for me. And also the 3 roles that you can have as the creator, challenger, and coach. And maybe that indeed you have to train all 3 of these muscles for yourself first, and then you can put them to work for your clients.
Yeah. Nice, Marja. Nice. Thank you.
Insightful. Thank you for that.
Who else? What most has landed for you so far?
I have a question actually. How do we practice agility in changing role? How do you really practice the capability of changing position?
Yes. Thank you, Alessandro. Very good question. How do we practice changing and agility? Well, first of all, that's a great segue into our 3rd session, which is all about what we say is making shift happen. Shift from the drama triangle to the TED. And we'll give you, share with you what we've learned over the years are powerful questions to ask yourself and reflections. The other thing I would say is that the exercise that you did for the homework for today is practicing the awareness of situations where you get triggered, and then practicing the agility of that several people mentioned of how they observed what they were doing and how they shifted. And practice. Become a beginner, Alessandro, would be my recommendation of practice different techniques that allows you to relate to yourself differently. Notice the inner state that shifts as you practice, what you're focusing on and what you're trying out as a technique. And as you practice observing your inner state and how that assists you in being in a more powerful role with yourself, a calmer, more empowered role, you are then able to be different in the way you relate to others. So practice with yourself. I would say that there is not 1 or 2 perfect ways to do this, but overall have the mind and heart of a beginner as you observe, take a baby step, practice, see what works, continue to do more of it. You're literally rewiring your neurological system to become less reactive and calmer and more intentional. Alessandro, I said a lot there.
Okay, I'm here. Thank you. I think you made you gave me a very good point of view, and I'll start from there. See what happens.
Thank you, Alessandro. Well, let's continue by looking at our homework for next time, because that's going to build on a question Alessandro just asked. So you're going to get 2 worksheets. The first worksheet we call the DDT worksheet. And this you're going to, here I'm going to bring it up on the screen. And you'll have a question. At least I think I'm going to bring it up. There it is. So the drama triangle roll sheet, you're going to get it later today. And we ask you to think of a situation where you saw yourself as a victim. And then outline who was the persecutor, who or what was the persecutor, who or what was the rescuer that came in to save the day. So this is just observation and recording, going back to the purpose of becoming more self-aware. Then we ask you to take time to think of a situation when you saw yourself as a persecutor. Now, some people say, oh, I'm never a persecutor. Well, you might be in a real truth-telling situation of where are those times where others maybe saw you, where you saw them as being defensive, something you said or do. And describe below what was that situation, who was the victim, and who or what was the rescuer. Then the same situation is, think of a situation when you saw yourself as a rescuer, who was a victim, and who was the persecutor. So I'd like for you to fill that out. And then the second task is now take a look at what we call the TED roll sheet. The TED roll sheet then is refer to the time in the DDT roll sheet where you looked at a situation where you were a victim. What was the dream denied? What did you really want? In other words, how can you step in and become a creator? Then look at a situation where you were the persecutor. What was your intention? How could you have learned from the situation? And we're going to develop this point a little bit more in the next week's webinar. And then the coach. How could you have shifted from being rescuer to coach? So these are the 2 worksheets you're going to get. I find these are fabulous worksheets to work with my clients on. As I do the basic explanation of the TED work, I give them as homework. So the purpose of the homework is to get familiar with the roles you play in the DDT and to begin thinking about how do you shift into TED, or as Alessandra said, how do you become agile in learning how to do that? So that's the homework for next week. We'll start the next session with a check-in and a homework. Let's all keep our fingers crossed that Barb is doing fine and she's going to be joining us again. And I missed her today very much. She is such a great partner and coach trainer. So let's send out good healing energy to Barb. So any final comments before we wrap up here? Okay,
this is Emma, and I'm really enjoying it. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Emma. Great to have all of you. So thank you, goodbye. Stop the recording, and have a great week. Bye-bye.
Thank you